everyone, and welcome to the Meet the Candidates event for the Assembly District 112 election. Both candidates on the ballot were invited. This event was organized and moderated by the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County. It will be recorded and posted on the League's website and on vote411.org. League rules require that if a Meet the Candidates event is recorded, it must be broadcast or rebroadcast in its entirety. My name is Kathy Kobrick. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County. I live in the town of Malta, and I will be your moderator tonight. The League of Women Voters of Saratoga County is a nonpartisan, volunteer political organization dedicated to the informed and responsible participation of citizens in government. The League never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. That has been League policy since 1920. Membership is open to anyone who is eligible to register and vote, so please consider joining your local league. We have received questions from the public in advance, and we have a lot of them. These were reviewed by league members and selected to be representative and to avoid redundancy. Questions of a personal nature are never included. Candidates, this is your opportunity to let voters know your stance on current topics and how you will address the issues facing Assembly District 112. Please do not waste valuable time tearing down or labeling your opponent. Deal with the facts. In your closing, please do not put your opponent on the spot with no chance for reply. We have 2 timers for this evening's event, and only one will be shown. Timer 1 will hold up signs for the candidate to glance at. Timer 2 will be her backup off camera in case something happens. Yellow means 30 seconds and red means your time is up. The name of the 2 candidates for the Assembly member seat in alphabetical order are Joseph Seeman and Mary Beth Walsh. Now it is time to hear their 2-minute opening statements. We have drawn lots to determine the order. The first to speak will be Mary Beth Walsh.
Thank you to the Saratoga County League of Women Voters for moderating tonight's debate and to my opponent for his participation. It has been an honor to serve the 112th Assembly District for the past 8 years, and I'm asking the voters to return me for a 5th term. As I reflect upon the last 8 years, one year in particular stands out to me, 2019. That was the first legislative session after the state Senate flipped so that all of the levers of power are controlled by one political affiliation, the Democrat Party. That set a chain of events and legislation into motion. We saw sweeping changes in our election law and our criminal law, including bail reform, raise the age, and discovery reform. Bills that would not have seen the light of day with a Republican Senate now were advanced and passed. Our state budget ballooned. Just since 2019, the state budget has increased a staggering $66 billion. Taxes have increased. New York has the worst business climate in the nation and leads the nation in outmigration. About 481,000 people left New York just last year, having had enough. When I speak with people, it's not a question of whether they will leave New York, it's when. Just as the average New York citizen looks at the unaffordability, the energy costs, the taxes, New York state government added further salt to the wound by sending $2.4 billion to New York City to pay for that sanctuary city's incoming migrants who have flooded the area. New York State is on the wrong course, and if that course is not corrected, we will continue to lose population and quality of life. I pledge that if reelected, I will continue to be an outspoken voice for our residents, seniors, veterans, small businesses, and parents, and I will continue to partner and work across the aisle with members of the majority party who are willing to find common ground. New York is a beautiful state, and we have so much to offer, but if left unchecked, the overspending, overregulation, and misplaced priorities will continue.
Okay, thank you, Mary Beth. Joseph Seeman, it's your turn.
Thanks to my opponent for joining us, to the League for holding this forum, for all you do, including your leadership on the Equal Rights Amendment, which I support, unlike my opponent. Folks, we're going to talk about this in many issues, and you'll find I stand with working and middle-class New Yorkers, consistent with the fact that I reject special interest money. My opponent's happy to take special interest money, and not coincidentally, you'll find she stands with the ultra-wealthy and corporate interests. For decades, I've been leading efforts by ordinary citizens to have our voices heard in Albany, to get big money out of politics and corruption, to protect the environment, to close corporate tax loopholes, for healthcare for all, to protect the right to control our own bodies, to fully fund our schools. I've walked dozens of picket lines. In the Assembly, I'll continue this fight and see that our district actually has a voice in the budget and in legislation that makes a difference, and that we get our fair share of funding. I hope we also get to talk about character, ethics, integrity, about basic values like democracy, honesty, and decency, essential principles every elected official must uphold. My opponent and her party have rejected democracy. Anyone who supports someone who refused to accept the outcome of an election can't say they're in favor of democracy. I've been holding town halls. I've invited my opponent as a partner in dialogue, but she refused. I've listened to the people. They say that they're tired of fear-mongering, hate-mongering, of violence and division. And so, Mary Beth, I'm asking you, how can you stand abandoned democracy, honesty, and decency in their lust for power?
Thank you, Joe. We have to be careful as we go on that I want to hear about you and not labeling your opponents. Now it is time to hear their 2-minute opening statements. Once again, Mary Beth Walsh is going to go first. Oh, we just did that. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was flustered. Candidates, it's time for questions. Once again, Mary Beth is going to receive the first question, and then Joe will follow with the second. And we're going to rotate on and off on who gets to answer the question first. You will have up to 1.5 minutes to respond to a question. You are not required to respond. You may pass if you wish. Each candidate will be afforded 2 opportunities to request an additional minute during the question session for a rebuttal, or an additional minute during the, or to expand on their answer. Please hold up your hand and wait to be acknowledged by me before you begin your extra minute. This may only be done during the question session. It may not be used for your closing statements. And remember, no interrupting each other. The first question is going to go to Mary Beth. What standing committees do you hope to be assigned to in the Assembly, and why?
Well, as the incumbent, I've been really happy to have been on the Education Committee since I started in 2017. I also serve on the Mental Health Committee, the Ways and Means Committee, and the Judiciary Committee. As my responsibilities on the floor, I'm the assistant floor leader for my conference, so that means that I have additional responsibilities in reviewing bills and organizing the debate and running floor operations. So unfortunately, I had to lose a committee. I had to lose the Libraries and Educational Technology Committee in order to take on the additional floor duties that I had. I also had to step off of the Ethics Committee, which I served on for a period of time as well. So, but I really like the committees I'm on. If I'm elevated to become the floor leader in January, because our floor leader has retired, Andy Goodell, then I may have to lose a different committee. We may have to just shake it back up again, and I might be on a different committee again. But I'm happy to serve on any of these committees. I think that they're really valuable ways to be able to engage in discussion at the committee level and follow bills through the process.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary Beth. Joe?
Good question. So I'd like to serve on the Health Committee. And that's because affordable health care is a real problem that I've heard from many constituents here. And I'll be fighting for health care for all. And it's not okay that there are people who go without health care, people who have to choose between paying their rent or mortgage or paying for their medication. Another committee that I'd like to serve on is environmental conservation. And that's a very big issue. It's very important to the people of this district who think that having a beautiful environment is critical to what upstate New York is about. I've been endorsed by the League of Conservation Voters, by the Sierra Club, because I will fight to protect our environment. Energy is another committee, and that goes right along with environmental conservation because we need to change our energy systems to produce clean energy and to stop burning fossil fuels. Another committee is education because we need to see that we have fully funded schools, including full-day kindergarten, which we don't have everywhere, that we have universal preschool education, that we have fully funded after-school programs. And yet another committee is economic development, job creation, commerce and industry, because this also goes hand in hand with energy and healthcare, creating good paying jobs that can't be outsourced.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. You're going to get the next question first.
Okay.
What steps would you take to improve tax revenues in New York State? And would that include higher taxes on the 1%?
Good question. Well, yes, I think that if we make sure that the richest 1% pay their fair share of taxes, we can lower taxes for everyone else. If you go to the store and buy a pair of sneakers, you're paying a sales tax. Yet Wall Street, when it sells stocks and bonds, doesn't pay any sales tax. Actually, there is a stock transfer tax on the book, but it's entirely rebated. There are loopholes where ultra-wealthy New Yorkers and big corporations don't pay their fair share, and we need to close those loopholes. Should there be tax breaks for yachts, for private jets? I don't think so. We need tax breaks for working and middle-class New Yorkers. So the way that we can fully fund our needs is to make sure that everyone pays their fair share so that the middle class is not overburdened. We also need to make sure that on issues of protecting the environment and taking action on climate change, that it is the corporate polluters who have to pay and not average New Yorkers. So yes, the solutions are clear. And as I said before, I'm not taking special interest money, so I'll never stand with corporate polluters. I'll never stand with the richest 1%, and I'll always stand with middle and working class New Yorkers and make sure our taxes are lowered.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Mary Beth, and at any time you can ask me to repeat a question.
And I will ask you, if you don't mind, to repeat the question.
Yeah. What steps would you take to improve tax revenues in New York State? And would that include higher taxes for the 1%?
I don't believe in raising taxes. I think that New Yorkers already have the highest personal income tax in the nation. I think that if you take a look at New York, as I have over the last 8 years that I've served the district, and you look at the budget growth that we've had, I think that we really don't have a revenue problem. I think we have a spending problem in New York. So I think that as far as the question is concerned, you know, millionaires account for less than 1% of all taxpayers in New York, but they paid nearly 42% of all personal income taxes. And the top 50% paid over 99% of taxes. So I think that in terms of figuring out what a fair share is, I think that the wealthiest New Yorkers are already paying very much a fair share. And I think really what we need to do as a state is take a hard look at our spending priorities and make appropriate cuts to give our taxpayers some relief.
Okay, thank you. This next question was a late one that came in, but it's a good one. And it's going to go to you, Mary Beth, first. How can New York bolster workforce development initiatives to better bridge the gap between employer needs and qualifications of job seekers in the state's most high-demand industries, including the skilled trades?
So I love this question because I think partly because I've been on the education committee, but also I'm just very interested in this idea of learning for work and how we as a state can try to address this middle middle skills gap that we have, which is an individual that has high school but not college. And there are so many jobs in that professional group that really need to be addressed. Back in 2019, I was able to serve and host a Learning for Work task force that went all over the state that our conference did in the off session period of time. And the report that it generated had a number of different recommendations. In a minute and a half, I really can't go into all of them, but I think a lot of it to me has to do with, we need to reduce the stigma of going to BOCES. We need to, it may involve something like rebranding. We need to do more things like Career Jam, which we do in Saratoga County, which is fantastic. We are so lucky in our area to have the Saratoga County Workforce Development Coalition and all of the work that they do to try to encourage more people to consider the trades. And they go right into our schools and try to get to kids as early as at elementary school level, and really try to show them that if they're interested in STEM, if they're just interested in putting things together, that there's a place for them. We also have great apprenticeship programs throughout the 112th. So there's a lot we can do.
Okay, thank you. Then you can always use your red card if you want to go on. All right, Joe, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I've got it.
Okay.
So we need to, in our educational systems, include workforce development. We need to have different paths in high school. There are many students who will go on to college, but many who would want vocational education, training to get into these jobs that need to be filled. And we can do this. We can fully fund our education systems. We can make sure that we have these different pathways, and it's simply a matter of making it a priority in our budget. And my opponent, who's been in office for 4 terms, can talk about these things, but she hasn't actually done anything to make a difference in our budget. She serves in the minority caucus. She's not been a voice in our budget. But I will serve in the majority caucus. I'll be part of crafting that budget and making sure that education is a priority, that our children are a priority, our seniors are a priority, our veterans are a priority. Building football stadiums, maybe not so much of a priority, but I will be, as they say, in the room where it happens, and I will be making sure that these priorities, including vocational education, are in our budget, and we actually get real change, real things accomplished.
Okay, Mary Beth would like to use a red card as a rebuttal.
Thank you very much. So I think it's really important for people that are watching this to understand that even as a member of the minority, I do participate in the budget process. During the development of the budget, we have a number of hearings that are held on the budget, specifically broken into different subject areas. So as a member of the Education Committee, for example, I can attend the education budget hearing and ask questions and participate in the discussion as we speak to the commissioners, as we speak to Betty Rosa, the members of the regions. As a member of the Ways and Means Committee, I'm actually able to go to every single budget hearing that I care to participate in and be able to ask questions, and I do that. So I do participate in the development and refinement of the budget, and I just wanted to make sure that people understood that.
Okay, thank you. And Joe wants to use his red card. Ready, Kathy? Joe, you're on mute.
So participating in hearings are nice. Citizens like myself can attend hearings, and I have done so without taking $140,000 plus in taxpayer payments every year. But Ms. Walsh has not been involved in actually crafting, in creating and drafting the budget. That's not how it works. The majority caucus creates the budget, presents the budget, and is involved in the final negotiations with the governor. So Ms. Walsh can talk about the things she says and the hearings, but it's not the same as actually writing the budget. Writing the budget is done by the majority caucus. Ms. Walsh has been in office for 4 terms, Does anybody really think that's going to change in a fifth term? That our district is actually going to have someone who has a voice in the budget in how our taxes are spent?
Thank you. Okay, I think we're all learning how the budget's made and about committees. Okay, so now we're gonna move on, and Joe, you're gonna give this question first. Do you support the New York Health Act, and why or why not?
I support the New York Health Act. I've supported it as a citizen. I've supported it going to the Capitol, lobbying Ms. Walsh and other legislators. The New York Health Act would mean that everyone can see a doctor when they're sick.
Oh, you muted yourself.
Sorry, it will mean that people don't have to choose between paying their medical bills or paying their rent or mortgage. The New York Health Act will mean that we stop giving all our money to insurance companies and instead we self-insure. You know, most of the world, with the exception of the United States, has health care for all. And there's no reason why we, one of the richest states and the richest nation of the world, has people who are actually dying from lack of health care. Yes, that happens. And here's a very important part of it. The New York Health Act will save money. The research has shown that when you look at the premiums, the co-pays, and the other costs, the total amount of money that each of us will pay for the New York Health Act will be a lot less than we're paying now. And that's for 98% of New Yorkers. So maybe the richest 2% may pay a little more, but we'll save money and we'll save lives.
Thank you, Joe. Mary Beth.
Thank you very much. So I am aware that my opponent supports single-payer health care. What I want people to know is that we already, to some extent, already have universal health care. It's called Medicaid. And in New York State, 43% of New York utilizes Medicaid. 57% of folks in New York City utilize Medicaid. And that program is the second most generous and expensive program in the United States, just behind California. And the idea of passing this bill, the New York Health Act, would be the granddaddy of the most unaffordable things that the state could possibly do. The New York Health Plan would need to raise between $91.5 billion and $226 billion in new tax revenue, and would need to receive waivers from the federal government for Medicaid and Medicare. An estimated 175,000 New Yorkers could lose their jobs with a hit to the insurance industry. Unions don't support it because I know one union does. I know the nurses union does, but a lot of unions don't support it because they have gone through the process of collectively bargaining really good health insurance packages that they would have to lose if everybody in the state has got to go on the same thing. I would just say that in my experience over the last 8 years, I've seen big government really do a terrible job at things. So we don't want to add this to the list.
Thank you. Mary Beth, you're going to get this question first. What challenges do you see have arisen as a result of the Bail Reform Act in New York State? And how will you address these challenges?
Well, the bail reform it was one of those bills that came out after 2019. The biggest problem with bail reform is that although we don't want somebody to languish in jail waiting for appearances just because they can't make bail, upstate, that really had not been as big of a problem. It was really much more of a New York City problem. And so unfortunately, what legislators did is they took something that was a New York City problem, tried to fix it and made it statewide. And it's been a complete failure. It's created a real revolving door for people to come in, get an appearance ticket for something that you and I would consider to be pretty serious, get released with an appearance ticket, maybe not come back, maybe come back. And it just continually revolves. We saw up in Saratoga Springs recently, the the robbery or the burglary rather of Lola, that store in Saratoga. It's been robbed a number of times. Those guys, even with that robbery, they were just sent out with appearance tickets. And Judge Waite said, you know, my hands are tied. What I would do to try to fix it is what a lot of members of my conference have suggested, which is to restore discretion, which 49 other states allow up to our judges to be able to make case-specific determinations about whether bail is required based on the facts and circumstances of that particular case and the rap sheet of potentially of the person in front of them, and to give that back to judges so that they can do their jobs.
Okay, thank you. Joe?
So I believe we need to keep dangerous criminals in jail. Those who are a risk of not coming back to court should be kept in jail. We need to be fair about it, however. It should have nothing to do with whether they have money or not. And what used to happen was people would get out of jail if they had a lot of money, and if they didn't, they'd languish in jail. So I do believe we need to make changes. I do believe we need to have discretion for judges, and we need to have fairness. My opponent talks about what she would do. Well, she's been in office for 4 terms, and what has she done? She hasn't done anything, and it's absurd to think that she actually will do anything with a 5th term. So I will actually be in the majority caucus, and I will be able to actually make those changes to make sure judges have discretion, to make sure that we don't have a revolving door, and that we have a system that is fair, that has equal justice for those who have money and for those who don't. I'll actually do something about this problem and our other problems, unlike my opponent, who tells us what she would do, yet hasn't done anything.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, I guess that's it. All right. What is your position on Proposition 1 and why? That goes to you, Joe.
Like the League of Women Voters, I strongly support equal rights for all. There's been a lot of fear-mongering. My opponent, of course, has been part of that fear-mongering, which...
Joe, I want to interrupt you for a minute. I don't want to hear about Mary Beth anymore. I just want to hear about you. And we know that she's in the minority party, and that's clear, and you've made that clear. But let's stick to what you're going to do, okay?
Let's talk about the Equal Rights Amendment.
Yes, thank you.
What it won't do is force boys into girls' sports or destroy girls' sports, which is what the fear-mongering is saying. As a matter of fact, the Gender Act, which gives equal rights to transgender people, is already the law. And what the Equal Rights Amendment would do would put that and equal rights for all of us into the Constitution. So it won't actually change anything about girls' sports. So that's some of the fear-mongering we've been hearing. We should have equal rights for people regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless of orientation, regardless of ethnic background, national background, race, religion. Equal rights is what America is about. It's what democracy is all about. And I'm strongly for equal rights for all of us.
Okay, thank you. Mary Beth, it's your turn.
Okay, so I've been an attorney for over 30 years, and earlier in my career, I did represent women who had been sexually harassed and discriminated against, and represented plaintiffs in labor and employment matters. I'm very familiar with what our current federal and state laws allow. We have very, very robust protections in New York State to prevent against the types of discrimination that are outlined in Prop 1. My point here is that we need to be very careful when we make a change to the New York State Constitution, because when that change is made, it's very difficult to undo it. It's difficult to get a proposition in front of the voters. It needed to be passed 2 years in a row by 2 consecutive legislatures. All of that's been done. It will be on the back of the ballot this year. What I'm concerned about here as an attorney, and having gone through the debate twice now over this, is that the language itself is really open to a lot of interpretation. It is very vague. And I think even individuals like Richard Rifkin, who is a professor at the Government Law Center at Albany Law School, where I attended, he mentioned in a recent interview that what we're going to get is a lot of legal wrangling and cases that are going to happen after this, if it does go in and if it does get passed. And I think that really this language that's currently in Prop 1 needs to get worked on more carefully. And at that point, it could go back out for another vote, but I don't think it's ready right now.
Okay, thank you. This next question is going to go to you, Mary Beth, first. Would you support a death with dignity law for New York State?
This is a really tough question for me. I've spoken about it with a number of advocacy groups that have come to visit with me down at the Assembly. Because my dad was died from cancer about 30 years ago. He would have been probably a prime candidate for this medical aid in dying bill that's been proposed. Where I stand on it right now with I've given it a lot of thought. Where I stand right now is I think that I want New York State to be the absolute best, #1 in the entire country when it comes to hospice and palliative care. I think that we're not right now, and we need to do better. I would want to fund it more appropriately. I'd like to make real investments in there. And then if at the end of that time, we needed to then take a look at a bill like this, then let's look at it. But I think that it's putting the cart before the horse to pass a bill like this. And I really think that as somebody that has worked a lot with the disability community, I know that there are a lot of people that are concerned. I've spoken with a lot of parents and family members who are very concerned about this bill. And so I think while I understand the reason for it, and I do have a great deal of sympathy for families and individuals that are really struggling here, I do think that with hospice and palliative care, we could really help so many New Yorkers. And I'd rather do that first.
Okay, thank you. Joe? Oh, unmute yourself, please.
I agree. We need to be the best in hospice and palliative care. And that's another reason why I support the New York Health Act.
Oh, you just got.
The New York Health Act, which would actually make sure that we are the best in hospice and palliative care. Now, I understand that there are concerns from people with disabilities that perhaps people would be pressured into ending their own lives. And that's a concern people have expressed. But we've seen states like Oregon, states like Vermont, which have death with dignity laws. And we see that these are not being abused and people are not being pressured into ending their own lives. And I've spoken to many people who have had people suffer, people who have wanted to have death with dignity, medical aid in dying, but haven't been able to. So I strongly support the Death with Dignity Act. It's something that other states are doing. We can learn from these other states, and we can make sure that this is done right, and people are allowed to have medical aid in dying. People are allowed to have doctors help them, and we can reduce suffering for those dying, and also to reduce the suffering of those around them who watch people die in unnecessary pain.
Okay, thank you, Joe. This question's going to go to you first. How would you address the affordable housing crisis in our communities?
Okay. Affordable housing is a very important issue that I've heard from many people in the town halls that I've held and the people I've been talking to door. There are many people here in Saratoga County who have family who can't afford to live here. But we can take real steps to do something about this. We can create mixed income housing. We can invest in mixed income housing. Not like the typical projects we may have seen where we have lots of poor people concentrated, but mixed income housing for poor people and middle income housing. You know, people have said that government should act more like a business. Well, businesses invest in housing, and so should we. We can also change our zoning laws so that we don't have these huge lot requirements, which are great if you're building million-dollar houses, but not good for building affordable starting homes for young families. And that's a big need for the people in our communities. We can do more for affordable housing. We can give people tax credits, first-time home buyers. This is a very big issue, and I will serve in the majority caucus, and I'll make sure that funding to invest in affordable housing is in our budget.
Thank you. Mary Beth?
So I think this is a really big question that I've been asked and have given a lot of thought to as well. I think one of the problems I think that's happened since 2019 is there have been a lot of changes to our landlord-tenant laws. That coupled with COVID has created a lot of disincentive for businesses and people to invest in creating additional housing opportunities, and I think actually has resulted in the opposite. It's made some folks who have been landlords to not want to deal with all of the additional regulation that the state has put on them, and they've pulled their properties that they previously would have rented out of the housing market to do maybe short-term rentals, or some of them are just outright just selling their housing stock because it's just been so untenable. I would say the first thing we should do is to take a hard look at what disincentives has the state of New York created in recent years that has led to existing housing stock being removed from the marketplace, and take a look at maybe rolling some of those things back. I think that is important. I would just say that in the 112th district, in whether you're talking about Ballston Spa and Milton, Clifton Park, Half Moon, Glenville, we do have affordable housing options. Is it enough? Probably not, but I see my time has expired. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. This next question is going to go to you, Mary Beth. How will you work to make policy and, I'm sorry. How will you work to make police and policing more transparent and accountable?
Well, I think that there was a huge package of bills that came out after 2019, which changed policing quite a bit in response to, in some instances, national events. Big packages had been passed. Some of the changes that were made, I think, have created a situation where there are many. I think it's getting harder and harder to attract individuals into police work. And I think that you've seen a huge wave of retirements of officers that are just saying that they're just fed up and they just don't want to do it anymore. One of the biggest issues I think that happened is now their personnel files are open and are subject to FOIL. And we're including anything that has been later unfounded. It's all open. That I know has been a big problem for some members of law enforcement. And also, if they're subject now, they don't have any qualified immunity that they had before. So they're subject to being sued personally for their on-the-job actions. So I think what a big problem we have is, if we're going to, we have transparency measures in place, and I'm not opposed to the idea of transparency, but it's having a net effect of making, the city of Albany have a whole ton of unfilled positions and people just not really wanting to enter the field. And that's a concern too.
Okay, thank you.
Could you please repeat the question, please?
I wanted to do that. How will you work to make police and policing more transparent and accountable?
Okay. Well, we know that my opponent has voted against transparency in policing, and I believe we need to have accountability and transparency in policing. And when the police who break the law are held accountable, that makes it easier for the rest of the police to be trusted by our communities. To make policing more effective, we need to fully fund the police, and we also need to make sure we don't ask the police to do jobs that they haven't been trained for. So we need to augment our police force with mental health professionals, with substance abuse professionals who are better suited to respond to many type of events that the police, unfortunately, are called to respond to, and that's overburdening the police. And I, in serving the majority, will make sure that those things are passed in our budget, that we fully fund the police, that we augment the police with other professionals, and we have real public safety.
Okay, thank you, Joe. This next question is going to go to you first, Joe. Polls show that most New Yorkers favor reasonable gun safety restrictions. What gun safety laws would you support? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, well, certainly we have an epidemic of gun violence, and we know that my opponent has voted against things like protecting us from ghost guns. My opponent has voted.
Hey, I want to hear what you're going to do. Thank you.
Well, we need to make sure that we keep the gun laws that we have in place, and we also need to balance gun safety with the concerns of legal gun owners.
Oh, you just got muted.
I'm sorry, when I'm elected, all
Muted again.
right, okay, does that
We'll
work?
give you your time back.
It works now. So when I'm elected, I will continue to have public town hall meetings, hearing from people on both sides of this issue. I will certainly hear from those who advocate for gun safety, and I've been designated as a gun sense candidate by Moms Demand Action. And I will also hear from people who are in gun clubs. And these are the people who I've been speaking to every day. Let's bring people together from different sides and come up with the right balance of solutions. We can protect the Second Amendment rights of legal gun owners, and at the same time, make sure we don't have dangerous guns, ghost guns, guns that are unnecessary in the hands of dangerous criminals.
Okay, thank you. Mary Beth, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, I would, please.
Polls show that most New Yorkers favor reasonable gun safety restrictions. What gun safety laws would you support?
Well, I would just say that based on that polling, New Yorkers should be delighted that New York has some of the most restrictive gun laws in the entire country already. So I think that how do we balance the right, as my opponent just said, the rights of legal gun owners against the desire of the community to have public safety? And I think part of the problem that we've got is all of the bills that have passed in recent years, certainly since I came into the assembly, have just been pushing further and further and further to encroach upon legal gun users. And what you really can't get your mind around is the fact that these aren't New York guns. 90% of guns that are used in the state for crime are out-of-state guns. They're not registered guns. There are many instances are community guns that are used in the commission of different crime in urban areas. So I want to just, and I am going to use, if I can, I'm going to use my extra minute because this just needs a little bit more explanation.
Wait until you're done, and then she'll add on to your minute.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I think that the issue isn't that we need more gun laws in New York State. I think that we already have a lot. Most recently, I think it was in 2022, we made it so that even people that wanted to buy ammunition, say they were target shooters, they were at a gun range and wanted to have ammunition, they have to go through a check now just to get ammunition. They already had to do it in order to purchase a firearm. So the people that I speak with regularly who are in trap shooting or are hunters, or they're infuriated by everything from the SAFE Act and forward. They think it's gone way overboard. And I think really what we need to do is take a look at the bail reform laws, the different so-called reforms that were made a couple years ago, and reform some of that stuff and try to get at the people that are actually using illegal guns that they shouldn't have, and get those off the street. As far as the ghost guns bill, that had bipartisan opposition, including Kerry Warner, Angelo Santa Barbara, and Billy Jones locally. And that bill, that was just a bad bill that I would not support. So I guess I've run out of even that much time. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. This next question is going to go to you first, Nova. Wow. How do you see climate change affecting New York State?
How do I see climate change affecting New York State? I mean, we have climate change. I mean, there's no question about that. I don't deny that. I do think that as far as the CLCPA, which is the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that was passed, I think it's a mandate that goes too far in trying to address global climate change. I think that New York State only represents 0.4% of global emissions, and it only is responsible for 3% of nationwide emissions. And I think it's a gross overcorrection. So I do think that while we want to take steps to live in a healthier New York and do our part to try to address climate change, I think that the CLCPA needs to at least go through a cost-benefit analysis to figure out if these mandates are going to work. I mean, I could spend an hour talking to you about the school bus electrification mandate alone. It's going to really raise costs on our businesses and on our taxpayers, particularly our school taxpayers, and it's going to raise energy prices. So we can believe that there's climate change. We can be committed to trying to take steps to address it, but the CLCPA is not the way. And I think that instead of doubling down as an administration, I think the governor and the legislature need to take a hard look at it and take a realistic view about it. It's not realistic as it's currently prepared.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
instead of trying to roll back New York's leading climate legislation, we need to stand firm and we need to strengthen it. We know that the cost of inaction greatly exceeds the cost of taking action on climate. What the CLCPA does is it provides New York regulators the tools they need to provide cleaner air and create a safer climate future. What we have here is a means of making sure that the climate is protected with incentives, and that's what the Cap and Invest program, which we need to get started, not need to roll back, we need to get started, will make sure that we reduce the amount of carbon that we emit, and we could have the money returned to the taxpayers. The cost of inaction is estimated to cost us over $20 billion more if we don't take action. And now, taking action on climate change can be something that average New Yorkers don't have to pay for. We can make sure that the corporate polluters pay for it, and that's exactly what this.
Kathy, Joe wants to use his red card for this one.
And that's exactly what the Climate Superfund Act does, which my opponent opposed. We can make the corporate polluters pay. We can make New York a leader in the clean energy economy of the future. New York needs to lead. We can set an example for the nation. We can create good paying green jobs that can't be outsourced. This is a benefit for our economy, not a cost. We can make sure that our children's future is protected. And if we don't take action on climate change, our economy will be drastically harmed. It's estimated that our GPA will be reduced by over 10% if we don't take serious climate action. So this is something we have to move forward on. It's for our children. We can't roll it back.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, we've come to the time where we're gonna get to our last question. And it's a doozy, and it's gonna go to Mary Beth first, because you were just responding with your red card. Where are the best places to get ice cream in the district?
Wow, I got worried when you led up with that, saying it was going to be hard. Oh boy. Okay. So I think Stewart's is great. I also think there's a place, I've discovered it now that I'm representing Broad Albin and soon Perth, out at the end of 29. I can't remember the name of it. It's got like some of the best soft serve around. I love that civility ice cream though at Stewart's, and I've had fun having a cone with Assembly members Warner and McDonald at different times in an effort to promote civility, which I think it can be sorely lacking sometimes. I also really enjoyed the tour that I got to do of the Stewart's plant, where I really got to see it made. So I have to go with Stewart's 100%, but there's some great soft serve out there too.
Okay, thank you. And how about you, Joe? Where are the best places to get ice cream in the district?
A few good ones. I happen to like civility. I think that's pretty good ice cream, and it's also a pretty good way for us to have our politics, as I've shown by having town hall meetings inviting Republicans, Democrats, independents, and others. So it's not just in our ice cream, it should be in our everyday politics. And there's lots of other good places. Ben and Jerry's, I'm sure, is pretty good. And there's a yogurt place. I don't know if that counts as ice cream, Menchie's yogurt, but that's kind of close enough. So wherever you like to have your ice cream, let's make sure that upstate New York is a safe, decent place where we have real civility and civility ice cream too.
Okay, well, thank you. It's time for our closing statements, and you're each going to get a minute to respond. And once again, I really want you to refrain. I know you want to talk about your opponent, but I want to hear what you're going to do for us, okay? So please refrain from mentioning your opponent. The first to go is going to be Mary Beth.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters for moderating tonight's debate and to my opponent for his participation. The voters this year will choose between two candidates who could not be more different in terms of background, experience, and philosophy. I'm an attorney and a small business owner who has spent my career advocating for children and the most vulnerable. I rose up through local government. I have served the 112th for 8 years. I am a professional person. I am not afraid to stand up and fight for what I believe in, but I am also a reasonable person. I believe in looking for common ground and in building consensus if I can. I hope that over the past hour, voters have had an opportunity to get to know me a little better. For more information, you're invited to check out my campaign website, which is marybeth4ny.com. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary Beth. Joe, it's your turn.
Thanks again to my opponent and to the League for having this important forum. Well, people know where I stand because I've fought for working and middle-class New Yorkers for years. I've been fighting for a fair budget from the outside for decades, and as your assembly member, I'll ensure that our district gets its fair share, which it hasn't gotten. Unlike my opponent, I'll be a real voice for upstate New York in the majority caucus that creates the budget. Now, we've seen from my opponent mailers that talk about the money she's brought back.
Joe,
But
please, not your opponent.
the facts are that it amounts to $1 per person per year brought back to our district, and that's not acceptable. And again, unlike my opponent, I will continue to hold town halls, to hold public meetings, to listen to Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And I'll never take any special interest money. I will always fight for you, the people of upstate New York. And yes, you can see my website, Joe for Assembly, JOE4assembly.com. Thanks all and good night.
Thank you. This is going to conclude our event. Please vote on or before Tuesday, November 5th. Ballots can be cast on election day between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. at your local polling place. Early voting begins this Saturday, October 26th, and runs through Sunday, November 3rd. Early voting locations are listed on the Saratoga County Board of Elections website. Information and applications for absentee ballots and early mail-in ballots can also be found through the website of the Saratoga County Board of Elections. Thank you so much, candidates, for attending this event and helping to educate the voters in Assembly District 112. It's really important for your constituents to see who you are and how you interact with each other. And thank you, audience members, for showing an interest in your state representatives. Good night, everybody. And don't forget to vote.